We said last time that the fight or flight response kind of looks like this, where we said that all, so time's moving this way, and we're at homeostasis, right? And then, what did we call this right here? So something happens, and what did we say activates this fight or flight response? What did we say starts it every time?
A perceived threat?
Yeah, so this is our perceived threat. And what did that sound like? Uh-oh, right? I'm not safe. There's danger here. Something bad is going to happen, or is happening, or did happen that I'm remembering, right? That's what activates the fight or flight response. And how long did we say this was supposed to last in a natural situation? How long? Yeah, not long, right? 30 to 60 seconds maximum. And then the danger's over. We're exhausted, and then we go back to homeostasis. We're exhausted, and then we return to homeostasis. And that's how it's supposed to happen. Now, a couple things I want to just play with for a minute before we get into here's what happens if we don't let ourselves turn off the stress response. You hear people say, well, a certain amount, I need a little stress to get going. I need a little stress. I need some, if I don't have some stress, then I don't function well. Is that accurate? Do you think? Why do you say kind of?
Puts my ass in gear. Excuse the language. When I'm on a deadline and I've been kind of taking my time, and then it's like, oh crap, and then I get that stress, and so maybe it's not a healthy thing, but that's what I have.
But it's motivational to you.
It is, yes.
Yeah. So here's how I think about this. Because in all the psychology books and in all the stress textbooks, they always include this little diagram where it kind of looks like this, where as stress increases, so see if I can remember how to do this. Stress increases, performance is on this side, or maybe it's the other way. It's performance as stress is on this axis right here. So stress is this way. To a certain extent, they say, stress, as it increases, performance tends to increase as well. And they have a word for that, actually. What is the word where it's called kind of the good kind of stress?
Eustress.
You've heard of that before, right? EU, they call it eustress. And what does the prefix EU stand for? What does EU as a prefix mean? When you give a eulogy, what are you doing about the person who is passed on and you're talking about him or her? What? Good things, yeah. EU means, the prefix EU is good. Means, so this implies a good stress. And you could kind of make the analogy, I guess, it's kind of like a guitar string. Does anyone play the guitar? Do you? Does anyone play the piano? Same thing. So you have a piano string. If you're playing the piano and you hit middle C, if the string is strung too tightly, what's going to happen to the note when you play it? It'll be sharp, right? It'll be too high. If it's not strung tightly enough, what did you say? It'd be flat, right? Be C flat, or maybe even B sharp, or it'd be not the right tone, correct? If you string your guitar and you tighten it, especially the smallest string, and you keep tightening it, what's going to eventually happen? It'll snap, right? Kind of the same with us, where we're okay with a little bit of stress, but in most cases, you wouldn't notice this. It's kind of, I like the term motivation better than lump it into, oh, it's a good stress, because I think it's a different sort of thing that's going on than the real stress response turning on. It doesn't feel the same way to me. When we played sports forever, and you know how you are before a game. That pre-game jitters, and that wasn't helpful. Like, I don't know if any of you watched, there were lots of football games this weekend. College football started. And you'd see the quarterback, first time, he drops back to pass, and he throws it, and where does it go? Boo! Just shoots over the guy. He's got too much energy, too much adrenaline, the wrong muscles are firing. Even when he would call that, oh, it's good stress, but still the wrong muscles it's halfway into the first quarter before he's making his passes perfect, because now the right muscles are firing. The passing muscles, instead of the fight or flight running and fighting muscles, are firing. So I kind of have a problem with this, but be that as it may, we hear this and we see this in books all the time. But here's what happens is, at a certain point, as stress continues to increase, performance goes down. And I would also include health goes down. And that's what I want to kind of show you today, as a little stress, okay, maybe a little, okay. But as it increases, it's not so good. And we all have experienced this, where we have different problems. That's what I want to go into today. The other thing that I want to kind of explain to you, or have a bit of a discussion about, okay, I'm going to ask a question, and if you don't, there's no judgment whatsoever with this question. It's an obvious, such an obvious experience. Has anyone in here ever been really drunk? You have? How do you feel? And no judgment. I mean, there's no like, man, you're dumb for being drunk.
Yeah, you are.
I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. That's between you and your liver, and that's the only thing. Okay? But let me ask you, do you remember when you were drunk, how did you feel during it, and how did you feel the next morning? Do you remember?
You feel good.
I feel good, or you?
Like me, okay. Like, good in a sense, like during, but the next day, you feel really bad. And I've noticed, like, when I do drink the next day, my anxiety and my stress is really high.
You notice that too. Now, when you say you feel really bad, what does that consist of, the feeling bad? Like physiologically?
I mean, a headache.
Headache?
Sometimes just sick to your stomach. And I think it's kind of different for every person, but.
Is it? Okay, what do you notice the next morning?
So this is why I actually don't drink very often, or I try not to drink too much, because, well, it's basically just poison is what it is, but I just feel bogged down.
Meaning?
Okay.
Bogged down?
Energy levels just
Okay, no energy.
have nothing, feel like I have nothing to give, like I'm worthless, especially if I'm trying to climb a trail.
Oh, so physically, there's nothing to help you get up there.
Yeah, it's just awful. And then, I don't know, I get kind of shaky. I think it messes with my blood sugar. I just feel shaky.
So shaky.
And it really takes about 2 days for me. I know a lot of people, I don't know how people drink every day, but for me, it's a good 2 days before I feel back to normal. And that's with me drinking like tons of water and trying to put like electrolytes in my body.
Okay. What's your experience the next morning after you've drunk just way too much?
Well, so for me, it doesn't take very much because I don't drink very often, but there has been times where I have, and when I do drink, I don't feel well pretty much immediately, actually. And then if I pass like even 2 drinks, I feel absolutely horrible the next day. I feel bad about myself. I feel depressed.
So there's an emotional component.
Yeah, mine would be more
Okay.
emotional, probably.
Okay, so now let's contrast that. Let's take that and contrast it with, has anyone ever gone out to eat and had, I know this sounds really strange, just a salad? You have?
Yeah.
How did you feel, besides still hungry, when you just ate a salad? Did you have any of those feelings? Where you didn't feel good about yourself, you felt couldn't make it up the hill if you tried, and what was it, the headache, right? Do you get a headache after you eat a salad?
Not really.
No, you don't.
It made me feel really.
That just sounds dumb. What?
So it made me feel really hungry.
Maybe, yeah, sure. Now, or you go out and do a bike ride, or you go for a run, or you do something that we call healthy behavior. Now, again, no judgment of it being superior to the one or the other, but here's the thing that I'm pretty sure about you and me, is when we do something that our body knows is healthy for us, it will give us feedback saying, good call. I remember once, and this was a long, long time ago, I was watching a basketball game on TV, and my mom had brought home this, she liked, there was a Hostess place nearby, and she brought home a box of Twinkies, like, that big. I don't know if they still make those or not, but it was a box. I ate the whole box of Twinkies. I was so sick afterwards, and to this day I cannot eat Twinkies. I cannot. I know that what's in there is yummy and delicious, but I can't make myself put it here. My body just said, that was one of the stupidest things you could possibly do. What are you doing? And so it made me sick. Feedback. And that's the case for most things. Our body will tell us, good call or not. You might be we talked about nutrition in our earlier class today, and it might be, there was one person who said every time she eats grains, she gets really tired. So for her, grains are not a good call for her. Somebody else, no big deal. You get the idea? Now, the reason why I say that is because stress will give us feedback saying, you're doing this too long, get me out of here. So, in other words, if it stays on longer than how long it's supposed to, it's designed to, it just continues, we continue in fight or flight in what we call chronic stress, where we don't come out of it, where we don't turn it off, all the things on that big list that we talked about last time. Our body will give us feedback saying, please do something else. Do something that gets me here, back to homeostasis. And again, there's no judgment here. There's no, like, you're bad because you're here. I know some people get really like, man, I can't do. They start making it worse by feeling guilty that they're stressed all the time. There's none of that. It's just your body, when you drink too much, it doesn't mean you're any less of a wonderful person, does it? You're still the great person that you are, but your body's going to go, yeah, don't do that again so much. Or with me and the Twinkies, don't do that ever again. So ever. So I want to talk about, just for a while, and I hope that we'll kind of, I'd like this to be a discussion as opposed to me just talking. What are some of the things that we notice happening when we're here? And I'm going to kind of break this down into a few different segments. So we said, last time, we said, all stress begins with a what? What would we call this? What? Well, what? A thought, right. All stress begins with a thought. That is a perceived threat, this right here. Now, if we are doing it the natural way, where we really are in danger, then we go through this, no big deal. Minute later, 2 minutes later, we get back to normal. Now, if we continue to have the thought of a perceived threat, then we start to notice the fight or flight response continuing in us. Now, at this point, in the short term, no big deal. Our body can handle it. As a matter of fact, I remember watching one lady who, she claims that this is actually, you should deliberately do this from time to time so that you can get better at being here when it happens. But what I'm concerned with is we continue to do this where this is stress, and it starts to turn into strains. Little things that are kind of, we can still function just fine. We can still handle most of the things that are going on in our days without any decrease in performance. But it still is noticeable that something's not quite right, and we're pretty sure it's because we're here. So what might be some of those things that we notice that we could say, yeah, that's probably because of my stress. It's not killing me. It's not, it's less than homeostasis. What might be some of those things?
Fatigue.
Fatigue? Yeah. Now, we kind of talked about this last time, Josh, right? When we had Josh hold up the bag. Fatigue, and we talked about the secretary I worked with, didn't we? Did I mention her? Where she was just tired at the end of the day, because when the body is in a state of fight or flight, all the muscles, or a lot of the muscles, are contracting, thinking I should be running or fighting. So we hit that one. What other things do we notice that are annoying?
Like neurological or physiological sensations.
Like?
Like for me, when I went through extreme stress, I'd get hot and cold feelings and tingling sensations, numbness, little zings, muscle pains, scalp headaches.
Okay, so you just mentioned a whole bunch of things. Let's kind of explore those a little, if you're okay with it. So you said, so kind of give me that list again. You said tinglings.
Yeah, like,
Where?
Out in the peripheries, like your fingers and your toes, sometimes just in random places. I would get sensations like water was being flicked on me. Really strange stuff. I went through a year of really high stress. So it really started manifesting itself in some really strange ways. I'd get hot and cold sensations, like a band of cold around my arm, or like burning sensations on the tops of my feet, stinging sensations, aching on my scalp.
Okay.
Let's see, numbness. Some numbness.
Where?
Usually in my feet.
Okay.
Or my hands.
Let's play with a couple of these, because these are fascinating. Now, think about, hold on one second, I'll get you. Think about the fight or flight response. Remember, what was the only purpose for it? The single purpose. to survive
Like,
physical danger. Now, we said last time we went through kind of the mechanics of what happens when you're in that mode. Now, why does it make sense that she would have tingling, numbness, hot and cold? This one I'm not sure about yet. We'll get to this one, but why would it make sense that you would have cold hands, cold feet? Why does that make sense? Did everyone hear that? Your blood is going toward not your core, but to your fighting and running muscles. But it is shunting. That's the perfect word, where it kind of stuck. You know when you ever shaken? Is that a word? If I shake your hand and you notice that it's freezing cold, that her hand is freezing cold. Now your hand was warm. But you've especially if they're going to speak next in a meeting. And you go and shake their hand and it's like, man, that's a dead fish. It's because the blood flow, it's the same thing with the feet. The blood it has to recruit as much energy, in other words, the sugar in the blood, to fighting and running muscles. You don't fight a bear with your fingers. Right? You don't. You fight them with these big muscles. So the blood, trying to concentrate, goes away from those endpoints, those kind of the extremities. Okay? I just think it's really fascinating, all the things that happen while we're in this fight or flight mode that in the short run, it's just miraculous. In the long run, really makes problems. So, sensations, that's one that I have not heard. I'm going to hold that off for down the road just a little bit on our graph here. Okay.
Well, I think irritability
Irritability.
or depression.
Okay, I'm going to hold on to depression for a minute. How do you spell it? Irritability. Is that how you spell that?
Yeah, close enough.
Close enough. That's a hard word to spell, irritability. So, this is interesting. Why would you get irritable? Now, thinking in terms of fight or flight response, every one of these is in terms of fight or flight response. Why irritable?
your sugar drops. Or it doesn't know it increases.
Okay, you do have an increase in blood sugar. It's your liver is just got tons of sugar, and it does flood the bloodstream during this. So you have an increase in blood sugar, but that's not quite the reason I'm looking for.
Is it because in the fight or flight response you want to get out as fast as you can, so patience levels drop?
Okay. Think of the fight or flight response. What are the two necessary and wanted emotions that you want in the presence of a bear? Two primary emotions that you absolutely want happening at an emotional, as a psychological level. Anger and that's anger. What? Fear. You want to be as afraid as possible so that you can, that's the emotion of flight. The anger is the emotion, those are the two primary emotions that are present, that are just activated as part of this fight or flight response for good reason. If somebody's chasing you and you're like, no big deal, and he's going to mug you maybe or something like that, so it's a real danger, the last thing you want is to be apathetic or kind of like, unless you know self-defense, you want to be going, oh crap, oh my gosh. So irritability is part of that it's like a mini anger where you just, there's still some control, but it's a natural reaction to the uh-oh thought to get irritable. It's kind of an anger-related feeling.
So what about when you're so fearful, you're so afraid that you freeze?
That's the third. The fight or flight, this is fight or flight or freeze response, where you just, like deer in the headlights kind of thing, where that is the third thing that could be happening as a natural response to, oh crap. And it's a it's a slightly different physiology that takes place, but it still is one of self-defense. Because, here's an interesting story. What if you are camping? You go out to, we were in Idaho a few weeks ago. We went up to McCall and we were hiking in some areas where very few people ever go. And they said, oh, there's bears here. There are bears? I don't know how you say that. There are bear here. What should you do when there's a bear comes into your campground and you're in the campground? What do they say you should do?
Freeze.
Yeah, they don't say, the people who know about protection against bears specifically, they say, no, you should just freeze. There was a student in here, she said, she spends a lot of time out in campgrounds and stuff, and camping, and she remembered that. She was camping one day, and a bear did show up in her campground where she was, and she remembered that she should freeze, and so she went right up against this tree, and she just, and she said, and the bear came up to her and kind of just went, and I won't touch you, but I'm going to get close. And the bear kind of just went. She was freaking out. I mean, just, you can imagine. But she said, the only thing I remember is I had to stay still because that was protective. And the bear kind of went like that a couple times, then he got bored and went away. And she was like supersonic this. But she knew freeze was the one thing that would protect her in that case. It doesn't protect us in a lot of cases during normal life, but apparently with some animals, our ancestors, that was what they did to stay alive. Okay. Is there anything else we can think of that's kind of, it's not getting in the way of our functioning normally during the day, but it still is obviously kind of what you said, when you're stressed, you notice that it's stress that's bringing it on, the thoughts. What do you think?
I think like fogginess in your mind, like
Oh, good.
unclear, like confusion.
Foggy thinking. Yes? Now, why is that the case? What's going on? We talked about this very briefly last time. What's going on such that this is going to happen in the presence of the activated fight or flight response? What's that?
It's our lizard.
Lizard brain cranks, Einstein brain disappears. The frontal lobe thinking kind of steps to the side, and the more ancient, what do they call it? The primitive brain takes over. And so, yeah, if you need to do calculus, if you're trying to run an equation and you're in fight or flight response, your body's going to go, I ain't doing that. No, I've got to get out. You're telling me I should get out of here, not solve this quadratic equation. Good. Anything else that's here?
Shortness of breath.
Shortness of breath. So what, can you describe that a little more? What do you mean by shortness of breath?
So when I was younger, I used to have panic attacks, and I used to feel like I can't breathe.
So you would just not be able to breathe at all?
Yeah.
So I would say that would be a freeze thing. Now, how do we tend to breathe when we are in the stress response? Faster and shallow. You see people on TV when they're really angry or they're, well, that's the one that's most obvious. And you see their chest are just going, oh, I'm going to get him. Right? Why does that naturally happen? What's the function of short, quick, shallow breathing? What are we trying to make happen? I don't know if there may be a little bit of blood breathing connection, but there's something that's even more involved with short, shallow, fast breathing. What is our body trying to do? Yeah, it's trying to get oxygen in way faster, with the idea that I'm going to need oxygen to help create energy at the cellular level. If we still don't do something about it, if we're still going, okay, I'm still going to stay up in fight or flight mode, by the way I'm thinking about things, then we start to notice these strains start turning into pains. So let's go through some of these. These are more obvious. What are some of the... So tell me again. So this, what you said, goes here. What you said you have... So chest pain. Popping. And then what else? Was that mostly it?
Pretty much. I kind of like, it starts in one spot, and then if it gets really bad, it will kind of like cramp.
It's like what?
It feels like a cramp in my
A cramp. Okay, this is interesting. Hold on one sec. Or is it related to that? Oh, go ahead then.
I have the same thing, and I used to think it was like heart attack.
It feels like that painful.
That's like what?
Okay. Now, I want to explore something that is a little bit down the road, but since both of you mentioned this, I've really been studying this a lot lately. And, you know, if you look at if you were a health scientist, somebody who was studying health as a profession somehow, and somebody said, okay, I need to know the main risk factors for heart disease, what would you probably say? The commonly held risk factors for heart disease. What are the ones that we know of? Because heart disease is number one for the most common chronic disease, correct? So what are the things that tend to lead toward that? What? Okay, sitting around too much. Smoking, for sure. Yeah, unfortunately, that's not as big a deal as it used to be, thank goodness. What else do we know of?
Diet.
For sure, what we eat. If it's a high sugar diet, high bad fat diet, helps out. What?
How much stress they're carrying.
Okay, so hold on to that part. Because they don't, and until recently, they wouldn't acknowledge that stress was a piece of that. Yeah, if you've got buildup of plaque in the blood vessels, it increases the likelihood. And what tends to lead to atherosclerosis? Because of, yeah, primarily because of high blood pressure, right? And smoking. The nicotine creates high blood pressure. If you're a guy, your chances is higher. The older you get, the chances are higher. So I saw one study where they took into account all the kind of risk factors that lead to heart disease, and they could only account for about 50% of all of the heart disease that's out there. 50%. So the question is, what's the other 50% that's leading to the lots of heart disease? Say it. It's because of stress. It really is. And if we analyze a heart attack, it's really, really interesting. And we're not going to spend too much time in here on this, but it's almost the same. When the fight or flight response is on, it's almost the same as nicotine. What you said with smoke, it's almost exactly the same action. Heart rate goes up, blood pressure goes up, blood sugar goes up, blood vessels narrow, and if you've got a blood vessel that's highly atherosclerotic and it's narrower, what are you setting yourself up for if one of those blood vessels is on the heart?
Stopping the blood flow to your heart.
Yeah, everything downstream from where that is suddenly clogged dies. And it's the exact same, I mean, it's everything about the stress response in the long term is directly related to heart disease and cardiovascular disease and heart attacks. Now, the other thing that I can think of is when you're in the fight or flight response, you got muscles contracting all over the place. You got these muscles are contracting, these muscles are contracting. You're breathing with muscles that aren't designed to help breathe. They call them intercostals. You should only breathe. Breathing naturally is just using the diaphragm. As it comes down, air goes in, your stomach moves out. We'll get into this when we get into the relaxation, one of the relaxation exercises. But if you're breathing irregularly, if you're tightening up, I mean, any number of things could happen. Okay, what else? What other pains? Let's continue with other things.
Just random muscle pains, arms, legs,
Muscle pain.
muscle cramps.
So cramps too. Not just pain, but
Twitches, eye twitches.
I got to tell you, hold on one second. Did I tell you about the lady who we taught how to meditate?
Yeah.
Where she was sitting and moving her leg all the time? Did I tell you about her? Yeah. That's kind of those twitches only at the whole leg level, but you feel things happen on your body where it's just going zzz, and you touch it and it's like, wow, that is really strange that it was going. Or have you ever been falling asleep at night and you find yourself going like this, you know, or your leg starts twitching and stuff? It's just your body's going, okay, finally she's lying down. I'm going to now try and deal with this stress, release it somehow, the energy of it through the twitching or the jerking or whatever. It's just, there's nothing wrong with that at all. If we went back to Josh's example, if you do that long enough, you're going to have pain. Easy. Okay, you said you wanted to say another pain? Headaches. Okay. Now, how many in here get migraines? Do we have a few who get migraines? Are migraines and stress, does stress lead to migraines? But not always. There might be other reasons for migraines. The other kinds of, does anyone in here get cluster headaches? So what does a cluster headache feel like?
So a lot of like pain, a lot of like behind my eyes and like back here, and it kind of like moves around.
Do you notice that there's a stress piece to it?
A little bit. Mine is more because I have like a really bad neck, so whenever like my neck hurts, it goes up in my head.
So if you go to a chiropractor, if you ever go to one, after you've been worked on with him or her, does it feel better?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So it's a structural thing in your case. Good. I had a friend who I'll tell you about later on, but he told me he got cluster headaches, and he said it's like a migraine times 10. I can't imagine how painful that must be. I have no concept of that level of pain. He wanted to shoot himself every day because it was just so painful. So cluster headaches and migraines may not always be stress related. There might be other variables, like structurally, as you were saying, good example. Stress headaches, pressure tension headaches, in my experience, 95% of the time, that is stress related. I remember this last weekend, I was talking to a guy who's a physical therapist, and I asked him, because he deals a lot with pain, I said, what do you do for people with headaches? He said, oh, headaches are easy. And in my book, they are easy as well. He explained to me, and this is the same explanation I give to, I mean, he's got it right on. This is how a headache happens most of the time, a tension headache, is you have muscles that start back here and they come up, and you know, it's like these muscles continue up on the top of your head, right? There's also nerves that are firing through here as well. And when those muscles, when they're in a state of tension, in the state of contracting, which is what happens when you're in the fight or flight response, these muscles start contracting. They're sitting on these nerves, and as they contract, they impinge on those nerves. That's what causes the headache. That's what's happening when you have a headache. So what's the solution to that? Besides take care of the stress. I mean, what's the solution to the symptom of headaches? What? Could be. Whatever it is that will relax those muscles so they're no longer impinging on those nerves that are sitting right parallel to them. He says, yeah, I just massage. That's what he says. I massage these for a little while. He says he knows exactly which muscles to massage. And he says, headaches are easy to fix. And when we get into the relaxation exercise, I say the same thing. Headaches are easy to fix. Because all of these things are symptoms of this problem. Get rid of the problem, symptoms will start going away. I love this analogy where you have all of these weeds, right? One might be a headache, one might be fibromyalgia, one might be pain in your chest, one might be, they're all symptoms, but they're based on the roots that is stress. If you get rid of one of these weeds, what's most likely to happen? Continuing with that analogy, if you get rid of the weed, this particular flower symptom, what's going to likely happen? Stress is still there, and what do roots do? Grow something else. What we do in America today, around the world, is we're busy dealing with the plants, the flowers. Oh, there's a headache, let's take care. Oh, there's fibromyalgia, let's take care of that. Oh, here's heart disease, let's take care of that. My feeling is, if you take care of the stress, all those things may not immediately, but over time, those things, I have no idea, and I'm not saying this because I'm anything different than anybody else. I have no idea what it feels like to have a headache. No idea what it feels like to be depressed. I have no idea what it feels like to have an ulcer. And I'm as normal as anybody. There's absolutely nothing special about me. I don't have good genes. If you could see my genes, you'd go, phew.
Before you started down this
Good luck.
career path, you didn't have any of those symptoms?
No, I did.
Oh, you mean just now?
Yeah, in the last 30 years, I've been sick maybe 6 times where I couldn't function normally. If we continue down this, I just want to make sure. So we start to get to immobility. So I'm going to play with these two for a second. Immobility. Where we can't function normal. We can function with this. It doesn't feel good, but we can function with this. But after we keep not getting the message, then we start to have the experience where we can't function at normal levels. So, for example, sickness. Now, why does it make sense that somebody who's in a chronically stressed state would get sick a lot. Lowered immune system. This is real. There's been monster amounts of research that look like this. Watch this, guys. As stress goes up, the immune system goes down. It's almost a perfect inverse relationship. As stress goes up, the immune system works less and less well. So my thinking for most illnesses, you know, the cough, the flu, and again, if you want to go get the shots, go for it. It's fine with me. That's between you and your immune system. I've never had a flu shot. And everyone every year says, Mike, you've got to go get the flu shot this year because this year it's going to be worse because everyone's getting it and you're going to get it too. And I never get the flu. I never get the flu. And again, I'm not saying there's anything special about this. But I have learned that if this is the case, then it must also be the opposite. As stress goes down, the immune system goes up. If we want to be really, really healthy for sicknesses, just get your immune system cranking. How do we do that? Turn off stress. Get stress down to here as a full-time thing. You've all probably had, and I did too, back when I was in college, in high school, test time would come around, I would get so sick. And after it was over especially, where I'd finally gone, oh, good, and my body would go, fine, you're sleeping for the next 3 weeks. Right?
I feel like this example that we're talking about is something that was a problem of mine. Because for like years, there was just constant stress. And I would get sick like twice a month.
Twice a month, yeah.
Just all year, pretty much. All winter,
Mm-hmm.
winter, and throughout summer, which you get sick during the summer. But now
Yeah.
that I've like been in therapy and learned how to
Yep.
handle stress more and everything, I barely get sick at all.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing how we'll go through this class, and as soon as you start relaxing, you'll realize, at the end of the semester, you'll go, I realize I wasn't sick nearly as much, just like you said.
So what does the immune system consist of, and what is it that stress kills that or diminishes
It just-
that ability, capacity? What
So the easy answer, the quick, easier answer to that is, when you're in the fight or flight response, several systems of the body kind of go into dormancy mode because the body needs to have as much energy as possible to run and fight. So you have the immune system, which is mostly housed in the gut. You know, that's where it's sitting mostly, is right in here. And then when a pathogen presents itself in the body goes, well, you're not part of me. So it just kind of gets all of its defense mechanisms, for lack of, to keep it simple, and it just goes, and it remembers whenever anything like that comes back in, and it's even easier the next time. But when the stress response is on, the immune system turns off. The reproductive system, is that going to help you run from a bear? So we see people with all kinds of problems that are reproductive problems. I mean, men, women, the plumbing, all the different things that could be, and it's a huge gamut of possible things. If it's associated with reproduction and the stress response is on, it's not going to work as well.
My sister has high over, and I think it's because of her stress.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, your body doesn't want to create a baby while it's needing to run from a bear. So it won't allow that to happen. I know that sounds really weird. Like, that doesn't make any sense. To me, it makes perfect sense. If you're in the stress response, nothing's working like it ought to.
Do you believe some people's genetic makeup predisposes them towards a higher stress response than other people?
So the research on that says if your mom not genetic, but congenital. If your mom had a stressful pregnancy, you might have a greater disposition towards stress, where things might more easily rouse you in a stress-related way. Yeah. There's not a lot of, there's very few things that are genetically passed. If you actually, the experts who really know this say, yeah. But in the studies that I have seen say, for sure, if the mom has a really stressful, that if you're a mom, you want to be as relaxed as possible. I know how hard that is, but you want to be as relaxed as possible for the well-being of your baby throughout their life, not just right at birth, but it's a full life thing where if it's bad during there, then it impacts them their whole life if they don't do something about it. That's a great question.
So adding to that, I had a major traumatic event happen during my second pregnancy, and I don't know if this is factual, but I have a theory that this child has ADHD, and I feel like maybe he's more high-strung because I was.
Very well could. And I hate to say that because as soon as you say, well, I can't help it, it's in my genes, then you suddenly are a victim to whatever that thing is. And if you can't, to me, it seems to me if there's any chance that I can do something about it, I'm going to take that philosophy every chance I get. And we know some things are inherited, we know some things are congenitally created. So very well could be. Okay, so let's continue with this. I don't know, does that help answer your question about the immune system?
Kind of. We have what we call autoimmune diseases.
Yeah, and it's interesting that 100 years ago there was no such thing. No, there were no autoimmune diseases prior to in fact, the doctors who studied this said the body would never deliberately fight itself, which is what's happening with most autoimmune diseases, which I think that's an interesting thing all by itself. But
A year ago, all the platelets in my blood disappeared. And they said this is an autoimmune disease, and the name for it is they don't know what caused it.
yeah,
Could it have been stress?
maybe. It might have been diet related, it might be stress related, it might be some chemical in the food that you're eating. I mean, there's a lot of different reasons why we have autoimmune diseases. There's not just one thing. But here's my blanket statement about stress is, whatever it is that's going on that may not necessarily be stress related, stress makes it worse every time. Cancer. I wouldn't say that cancer is caused by stress, but in every case, and the people I've known or I've worked with who have cancer, one of the things the doctors are telling them, you got to keep your stress. When somebody had AIDS, most of you don't remember when AIDS first started, and people would suddenly get cancer, this Kaposi sarcoma, they would get all these different opportunistic diseases because they had no immune system any longer. And so one of the things they told them right off the bat is, do not do anything that gets you this direction. Because they knew there was no immune system, and as soon as there's no immune system, amen to every opportunistic disease out. They die of the flu or pneumonia or this cancer that nobody was dying of when they were 30. What else could we put here? I remember one person said depression, yes? Extreme tiredness, good. Okay, so what would be the explanation for depression? When somebody goes, and this is, people hate me to say this, but this is still, I still contend that this is the case. There's a lot of variables that are associated with depression, no question about it. When somebody goes to the doctor and you're diagnosed with depression and you say, well, what is causing this depression? What does this doctor usually say? Here's what's wrong. Meaning, there's They,
Imbalance, that's what it's called.
they'll say some kind of chemical imbalance, right? Some brain chemistry imbalance, yes? So my question is always, and again, there's other variables that are associated with depression, but my question is always, what caused the imbalance in the first place? Because that to me is still a symptom. Because I'll ask the question, was this person depressed when he or she was 5 or 10? And most of the time, not always, but most of the time they'll say, well, of course not. He's 5 years old. Who gets depressed when they're 5? That tells me something happened in their experience that created an imbalance. It's not genetic. It's not congenital. It is something that they experienced that created this. And if you look at what's going on chemically, when the fight or flight response is on, all of those feel-good hormones disappear. They just kind of, we're not playing now. The only 2 hormones that are in play during the fight or flight response are what? The 2 hormones. They said it in the video, adrenaline and cortisol. Those are the primary, a little bit of testosterone, strong. All the other feel-good chemicals, they're like, no, we're not in the game right now. So it makes perfect sense to me why this right here is happening as a result of, it is a symptom of stress. And that's not 100% of the time, but it is most of the time. Deal with the stress itself, and frequently we see people who are no longer in that depressed mode.
So I'm just curious, not about depression, but about like a sadness, if maybe somebody's in mourning. Is it the same physiological, like what's...
No, if you're in mourning, that's a good thing, and you want to go through that kind of release and sadness. There's nothing wrong with that. That's a long conversation for another day, but I don't think sadness is an emotion that's natural for here. I don't think. Okay, let's see. How could we explain, so we said cancer. What's the explanation for an increase in proliferation of cancer cells? When something in the body is discovered by this particular system, it goes, oh, you're not part of me. What system is that? The immune system. See, we always have cancer going. All of us have cancer going all the time. Cells growing abnormally. But our immune system goes, oh, you're not a part of us. Okay, I'm going to take care of you. But if you don't have an immune system, because you're in the stress mode, then you're going to have the proliferation increases, they metastasize, they grow, it becomes more likely. The last statistic, I know we're running out of time. This is statistics I've heard a few times, and I don't know, I can't verify it, but it makes sense to me. More people die in our country at a certain day of the week than any other. What is it? A certain day of the week.
Monday.
Monday. Why would you guess?
Monday is the first day of the weekend. People tend to be a little on edge on Mondays.
Because what's going on?
They're having to go back to work.
And people hate their jobs. And people hate going to school. But mostly people hate their jobs. More people die on Monday morning at 9 a.m., between 9 and 11 a.m. than any other time of the week. There's a day of the year when more people die. Do you know what it is? Not Christmas, but you're close. What?
Not during the summer.
Not during the summer. No, it is the day after Christmas. Now think about what's going on that day.
Oh, people are.
All the celebration that's happened for the last 2 months is over, and reality is setting in. Oh. Okay. Now, that's all we need to do about, here's the problem. The rest of the semester is, now what do we do about it so that we stay here, and when we go here, we know how to get out. Because we're going to go here for sure. But we're going to learn how to stay here so it's permanent, and then when we forget, what do we do? And that's every day for the rest of the semester. The stress that you feel now is not because of what's happening now. This activation of this is not because of what's happening now. It's almost always something that's either a thought about some future something or a thought about some past something. But we're going to get into that big time, so just kind of let that sit there. There are a few studies that kind of say, yeah, you're more likely to be responsive to stress or be more, what's the right word? Prone to stress because of certain factors. Genetics, whatever you want. The only problem that I have, not the problem, but where I like to go with stress is, if I can't do anything about it, then I'm not going to worry. But if I can do something about it, then I will do everything possible to make it so, even if I am prone. Like, I know for one thing, in my family, we are really, really prone to addictions. I have just brothers who are all alcoholics, and addiction runs pretty strong in our family. I don't know if that's a genetic thing or just a familial thing. I don't know for sure. But the instant I say, well, there's nothing I can do because it's a genetic thing, then I'm doomed, right? But as soon as I say, okay, this is something that I notice happening in my family, but I can still do something about it, then I'm no longer doomed, right? So I don't know, and it may be true, but I want to focus on, in as many instances as possible, can I do something that gives me power to not be stressed in the first place? Questions?
So I have a question about anxiety. Is anxiety and stress hand in hand, or is anxiety in a category on its own?
So when you say anxiety, what do you mean?
Like just having anxiety in your body, like you feel anxiety all the time.
So give me a different, instead of say a different way of describing anxiety.
Like you feel anxious.
That's it, you just said the same thing.
I don't know how
Do you know what I mean?
describe it.
So,
So how do you feel when you feel anxious?
right.
Kind of, I'm not like shaky, but like inside I feel shaky.
Okay, so the way you describe it, anxiety, stress, synonyms. Same thing, to my mind. It's just how the symptoms show up for us are different for everybody. And in your case, you said you're shaky, did you say? Mm-hmm. And what else? You kind of went, hear something, right? Yeah. So that's what you notice when you feel anxious. And I would say, yeah, and that's the same thing as when you feel in fight or flight response. So I'd say they're pretty close to the same thing. It's a good question, because you hear that term not thrown around a lot. Oh, I'm just anxious. And I'm thinking, yeah, you're in fight or flight response, or you're in stress, or you're anxious. It's all the same thing.
I feel like stress really feels like it's something on its own, so that's why I was kind of confused.
Yeah, it's the same thing.